of the greatest things, but probably also the biggest pains in this caravan, is the most enormous front table. It's great because it's massive, so it has plenty of room, and it's really lightweight whilst being robust. Nobody's succeeded in denting or marking it yet, but it's an utter pain in the rear if you want to put it away, out of the way, because the leg only folds in half to enable it to become the base for the spare bed, and thus it's totally unstorable. Also, because it relies on a wall-mounted rail, and unlike the Ariba Touring series of caravans, we don't have an outdoor rail, it can't be used outside. I had considered building some sort of extra leg system so that the table could be used outside, but it's just too massive. So, as we've already got fixed beds for everybody, and as we've only ever used this front bed when the kids and I have been doing a one-night stopover on the way somewhere in the depths of freezing winter, I've decided instead that we need a much smaller table that can fold down into a single bed at the front. So, having worked out a clear specification, I've handed over the requirements to an ever-resourceful husband who has come up with a plan to build a lightweight honeycomb table from some thin scrap ply we've got hanging around. He starts by removing the annoying leg from the original massive table and reinstalling a fully folding, super stable one and an additional wall bracket into my home office so I can have an extra workspace and the table's put to good use. Then the work really starts, ripping down strips of ply to form the honeycomb core. Then the pieces are offered up for a quick test fit before cutting to length and notching to enable the internal strips to slot together. Once cut, the external strips are glued and pinned into place, and then the internal strips are arranged to form the, well, not quite honeycomb as it's not hexagonal, but a square wooden mesh. The tabletop and the bottom have been cut oversized at this point to give a better final finish when the trim routers run round the edge later. The rear edge, which will have a bit of aluminium profile attached to it later on, has been reinforced by a glued on second strip and pins. The next job is to reinforce the innards of the table where the leg will go and install T-nuts to receive the table bolts. These have been used for strength, as I may, later on, make an extra cushion so that when folded the table base can actually give us a U-shaped seating area at the front. Not to mention, of course, this is a family caravan. The plastic base of the table leg is drilled to enable the more robust bolts to fit through. Then, once the T-nuts are installed in the strengthening piece of wood, this is glued down and left to go off under some considerable weight. Alongside the strengthening piece is the mesh, which has also been glued and clamped down to ensure that nothing twists whilst everything is drying. Once the glue on one surface is rock solid, the whole thing is flipped over and the remaining face glued and pinned on and again left to go off until it's rock solid again, before the edges are cleaned up with the trim router. Unfortunately, as we've been using scrap wood, there are a couple of imperfections, so it's over to me and the wood filler to sort it all out. I'm not bothered about what colour of wood filler I'm using, as the next step is to paint the table. One of the downsides of having an upstairs in the caravan is that it can be quite dark, so I've got some spare pale grey paint that I want to try out for the table. It's emulsion, but I've got some really nice hardshell varnish that can go over the top to protect the finish, and that's non-yellowing. However, having got a couple of coats on and tried it out in the van, it just looks rubbish. So on the underside, I'm experimenting with an ebony wood dye that I've used on furniture we've built for the house, and it looks a business. So out comes the power sander in an attempt to strip the pale grey off. Having got as much off as possible, I go back over the upper surface with the ebony dye. And gradually build up coats, rubbing with a fine grit glass paper between coats so that the final surface is as smooth as possible. Though it's black, the dye dries very matte, so it's really easy to see where you've been and gives a great finish, allowing any grain to really show through. Though it does look much better on the birch ply that we've used in the house, as the grain patterns there are much better than we've got here, but it'll do nicely. I use these red standoff blocks to enable me to get to all the surfaces without fear of contaminating the brush with dust. And even, sometimes with some finishes, to enable me to spin the piece wet and still finish the opposite side, thus preventing those really annoying tide marks that you sometimes get. I found that this wood dye goes on really well by fine brush, but to avoid brush marks in the clear protective top coat, I'm using a foam spatula pad. Then the last thing to do is to refit all the hardware and take the new compact table into the caravan, and here it is in situ. I hope you've enjoyed following along with our little project. We've had the table in place for a couple of months now, for our Scotland trip, a Fedora Fest and a weekend in the New Forest with friends, and I have to say it's absolutely brilliant. It's the perfect size. 2 can eat at it, 3 if someone pulls up a stool, and it's great for card games and drawing and even having 2 laptops on it. But primarily I can actually reach all the top lockers at the front now without the table getting in the way. If you like what you've seen, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to follow along for more caravan makes, mods and mini adventures. Bye for now.